The movie The Fountain came out in 2006, and it is still a confusing story for many people. It is made quite differently from other movies, and it is really hard to understand its plot. Even after watching it multiple times, it may not be clear what it really means. Maybe some of you has seen this movie, and if you still don't get it or its true message, then this video might answer all your questions. If a normal viewer watches this movie, they will see 3 stories in it. One from the past, one from the present, and one from the future. Obviously, the movie is like that, and the storylines are designed like that. So maybe no one can deny that. But things are a little more complex than that. Let's keep the 3 stories of The Fountain completely separate. First comes the story of the past. By the way, in all 3 stories, we have the same characters, but different situations. The story of the past is set in 1478. We see Spain, and in fact, it is a period where a kind of war was going on in Spain. The story also involves the Spanish Inquisition, which was a time of religious persecution and violence. Queen Isabella was in danger of losing her throne, as her enemies were slowly taking over many areas of Spain. And these enemies were very cruel. So the story shows her situation. Now here, Isabella tells Thomas about a treasure, a special thing that can change her life and save her throne. But this is not an ordinary thing, and not everyone can get it. It is something that no one has ever obtained. The Queen trusts Thomas more than anyone else, and the truth is that Thomas loves Queen Isabella with all his heart. The tree was the tree of knowledge. Humans gained knowledge, but they were banished from heaven. Now everyone knows this story, but there is another tree on earth. It is called the tree of life, and it has been on the ground since the beginning of life. And this tree has a special power. It can give life. But what is even more amazing is that it can also grant immortality. And now Thomas's mission is to find the tree of life and bring it to the Queen. Here, an old man gives him a dagger with 3 holes in it, and he tells him that this is not an ordinary dagger, but it has been enchanted by many rituals. And with the help of these holes, he can also find clues to the tree of life on the map. The tree of life is very ancient, so it has been hidden from the world. And since the oldest civilization is the Mayan civilization, only they know this secret. Here, Spain was about to be conquered, and Thomas had to find that tree soon. And he spent many days searching every corner of that jungle until his soldiers rebelled and didn't want to do this anymore. But Thomas, who would go to any lengths to get his love, he didn't give up at all. And he always remembered the promise of Isabella's ring. Meanwhile, his close friend also tried to kill Thomas, but Thomas killed him. Now this story has been shown so far, and a lot of things are clear about the tree of life, and especially about Thomas's mission. And here it is also about saving Spain. But here it is getting 2 things that a person would do anything to get. We also see another story here, which we can assume to be the story of the present for now. And the first one was the story of the past. Here too, the main characters are Tommy and Izzy. Obviously, Izzy is short for Isabella, and Tommy is related to Thomas. Now this story of the present goes like this. Tom loves his wife Izzy very much, and Tom is a surgeon by profession, but Izzy is sick. Now Tom and his team were researching a special kind of compound. Their subject was a monkey, and it had the same brain disease as Izzy. Here it is important to pay attention to Tom's character. He is in such a situation where he is trying to make the impossible possible. Although he knows that some things are not in human control, he doesn't give up, and he is most invested in his research. Now we see that they are going to do a surgery. They are going to test that compound. But soon he comes out disappointed because he had failed again. At the same time, he looks up and sees something. Whatever it was, we will find out later. But here, this scene is a symbol of a nebula, which is also called Exabalba in the movie. Before the surgery, Tom had left his wedding ring outside, but after the surgery, when he starts looking for it, it was gone. Now, in the movie, these small details will help us understand this complex movie. Anyway, after this successful experiment, Tom's boss comes there and tells Tom that he is not resting. He is just looking for a cure. Anyway, he goes home, and for a moment he is scared because he calls Izzy but gets no answer, and he fears the worst. The window is open, so he goes there first and finds Izzy sitting there. She was with her telescope. Now Tom also goes there and sits with her, and they talk, and through the telescope, Izzy was looking at the same nebula that she calls Exibelba. Tom is also surprised to hear this and wonders why she is saying such things. So here, Izzy was actually writing a book, and the name of that book was The Fountain. Tom asks if the book is finished. Izzy says almost, but Tom is puzzled that the book that Izzy is writing is historical. Actually, the story that we saw at the beginning is the story of this book. Now we have understood that Isabella Thomas Spain and everything else are Izzy's story, which is in that book called The Fountain. But still, what is the real meaning of that story? Are Izzy and Tom really connected to that story? If you think about it, there are also references to rebirth. Anyway, we have understood a little bit so far. Now they are sitting outside and talking, and Tom notices Izzy's bare feet. Although they were sitting in the snow, he asks Izzy where her shoes are, because both her feet were in the snow. And then Tom finds out that Izzy's nervous system has also stopped working. When he puts her in the bathtub, the water is very hot and Izzy doesn't feel anything. Anyway, after this, Tom also gets stressed. The next morning, Izzy has her book, The Fountain, in her hand. But because of work, Tom can't pay attention to it and leaves without looking at the book. Because he gets an emergency call from his lab, Tom finds out that the compound he tested on the monkey has worked. But here Tom's real goal was something else. He asks if the compound has affected the brain tumor. Now Tom doesn't sleep when he is at home, and he finds Izzy's book, The Fountain. She had said earlier that it was almost done, so he starts reading it. And with this, Tom goes to that era of Spain and gets lost in that story. The one that we explained first about Isabella and Thomas, where they were afraid of what, and what mission did Isabella give to Thomas? In the book, Isabella's throne is in danger. A ruthless man is going to take everything from her. And Thomas loves his queen so much that he goes on an impossible quest to save her. And he looks for the tree of life, which is almost impossible to find. A cure that will make her immortal. And in real life, that is, in the present, Izzy has a disease that Tom is looking for a cure for. But whenever Tom reads this book, we see such reactions from him, as if he has seen all this before. Anyway, the next day we see that Izzy has gone to a museum, where Tom also comes. And here, Izzy shows Tom some Mayan artifacts, which have myths about rebirth and the tree of life. There is also a hint about Exibelba. But here, Izzy believes in all this, but Tom is not interested in it, because every time the topic comes to death and life. And why is Izzy mentioning these things again and again? We will clear all this at the end. Now, Izzy suddenly collapses here, but Tom catches her quickly. She was unconscious, and in the next scene, we see her admitted to the hospital. It means that Izzy's condition had worsened, and Tom, who was already very sad and stressed, now had more problems, because Izzy might not survive now. After regaining consciousness, that same night, Tom goes to his lab, where his staff was very happy with their new research. But Tom hadn't found a cure for the brain tumor yet, so he decides to do another test that night. His staff gets angry with him for this. He even has a fight with Dr. Lillian. Although she explains to him that you can't make a cure overnight, it's impossible. Tom is very angry and sad about this. Now, here in the movie, we are shown for the second time that Tom has lost his wedding ring somewhere. He doesn't have it. Keep these points in mind. Anyway, he comes back to the hospital where Izzy was admitted. He spends time with her, and they have a conversation here. Now, this is a situation where Izzy is about to die, but Tom doesn't want to lose her, and he can't even save her. It's not in his hands. Anyway, Izzy tells him the story of her friend named Moses, who once went on a trip with her. She says that Moses' father had died, so Moses planted a seed on his grave, and with time, a tree grew on his grave. Anyway, at the same time, she gifts Tom a pen and asks him to write the last chapter of the Fountain Book himself, so that it is complete. Here, Tom says that how can he do this? But Izzy insists. And that night, Tom reads Izzy the story in the hospital, where Thomas is attacked by Maya with the help of the Inquisitor. But then, Izzy's breath stops. He looks at an old patient in the hospital with fear. The patient stares back at Tom, and he feels a strange connection. But then Lillian arrives and interrupts his thoughts. He recognizes the old patient as Izzy, who didn't survive the surgery. She died, and Tom was devastated. The next day, we see her funeral, where Dr. Lillian also attends. Tom is heartbroken and furious. After burying Izzy, Lillian tries to console him, but he rejects her words. He says that death is a disease that can be cured, and he will find a way to do it. He vows to search for immortality. He leaves her and goes to the lab, where his staff is surprised to see him. Now we will try to understand the third storyline of the movie, which is very different and intriguing. Here we see Tom in space, traveling in a spaceship unlike any we have seen before. His outfit is also very unusual, and he is alone in this organic bubble ship. In the center of the ship is a withered tree, and Tom is heading towards Xibalba. In this storyline, we see Tom meditating frequently and talking to the tree, as if he is talking to Izzy. He says many times that they are almost there. He also makes a tattoo of a lion on his hand with the same pen that Izzy gave him. He has hallucinations of Izzy repeatedly, and she always tells him to finish it. But Tom refuses to listen. This means that he should complete the last chapter of the book. We have seen all this happen many times. At one point, it seems that the tree is dying, and Tom cries bitterly for it. He reaches Xibalba and sees Izzy there. First, she appears as Izzy there. First, she appears as Isabella and tells him to finish it. Tom breaks down and says that he doesn't know how to finish it. Izzy says that he does and he will. Finally, Tom admits that he is going to die. The story becomes more complex with this revelation as we see the scenes from the second storyline. Meanwhile, Tom enters the bubble and his body starts to dissolve. We see the dead tree blossoming and he becomes one with the bubble. This is how all the stories end, but they also leave a lot of questions in our minds. What is really going on? The truth is that this movie is not what it seems. First of all, this movie focuses on two important themes: life and death. Death is something that no one can escape. Everything that lives has to die. This was why she repeated this line many times. Death is the road to awe. We saw what happened in Tom's life. Death took Izzy away from him, and Tom started to see death as a disease. But here is an interesting thing. Whenever we saw the wedding ring on Tom's hand, it was a sign that this was not the real Tom. He was lying on a hospital bed, where we caught a glimpse of him. He was also dying, and he had been dead for many years.